After what many critics describe as losing the Iran war, President Trump is now pushing U.S. defense companies to ramp up weapons production, fueling a debate over whether this reflects urgent rearmament or a politically driven effort to project renewed strength. Trump has invoked a special Cold War-era emergency law to compel U.S. arms manufacturers to increase output of key munitions, using federal authority to prioritize missile and ammunition contracts so that production lines can be expanded more quickly than normal market forces would allow. This drastic step comes on the heels of what looks like a desperate move to recall or limit advanced warplanes previously allocated to Israel, a decision framed by some analysts as an attempt to conserve scarce high-end platforms after months of intensive operations against Iran. The U.S. military has been hit by a massive shortage of critical missiles following the Iran conflict, with internal assessments and think tank studies warning that it could take years to rebuild stocks of air defense interceptors, cruise missiles, and long-range precision weapons. Amid these strains, there is growing concern that the United States is not fully ready to handle a major showdown with China, especially in a Taiwan contingency, as depleted munitions inventories have created a near-term window of vulnerability, even though planners still judge a Chinese invasion in the immediate future as unlikely. Amid a severely depleted weapons stockpile, President Trump has invoked the Defense Production Act, according to a CNN report, using emergency powers to jumpstart the rearmament of key U.S. munitions and missile inventories. CNN reported on June 17 that Trump used this law to compel U.S. weapons manufacturers to increase their production, effectively directing private defense firms to prioritize government contracts and expand capacity beyond normal peacetime levels. Trump said he had determined that current conditions exist which may pose a direct threat to U.S. national defense, arguing that shortfalls in critical weapons and vulnerabilities in industrial capacity justified the extraordinary step. According to CNN's coverage, the underlying document cites limited production capacity, fragile supply chains, and multiple bottlenecks in the munitions sector, warning that these weaknesses could undermine America's ability to respond to future crises. CNN described it as a significant move for a president to formally compel private companies to raise output, noting that such use of emergency authorities underscores the seriousness with which the administration views the current shortages. The document read, quote, in particular, systemic constraints in the munitions industrial base, including limited production capacity, fragile supply chains, long lead dependencies, and related production bottlenecks, may impair the ability of the United States to produce, sustain, and expand the availability of munitions, missiles, and equipment required for the national defense, unquote. The move legally compels private companies to prioritize weapons production for U.S. government needs, pushing defense manufacturers to put Pentagon orders ahead of commercial contracts so that critical munitions are replenished as quickly as possible. Trump stated that around $200 million worth of bombs were expended in just the final 2 days of the Iran war, a figure he used to illustrate how intense the air campaign had become and how rapidly U.S. inventories were drawn down during peak operations. Pentagon officials publicly insisted that stockpiles remained sufficient for immediate requirements, but behind closed doors, concerns grew over whether existing inventories could sustain another major conflict or simultaneous crises without significant risk. An analysis by Center for Strategic and International Studies highlighted major drawdowns in PRSM, Patriot, and THAAD interceptor stocks, warning that the depletion of these high-end precision and air defense systems could constrain U.S. options in any future confrontation with peer adversaries. Beyond the Iran war, the United States also supplied large quantities of arms to Ukraine and Israel, further stretching production lines and accelerating the rate at which key munitions and systems were taken out of U.S. inventories and sent abroad. Experts estimated that basic replenishment of many of these weapons could take between 1 and 4 years, cautioning that full recovery of stockpiles to comfortable levels might take even longer given industrial bottlenecks and budgetary limits. Pentagon Chief Pete Hegseth told CBS there wasn't a crisis, dismissing some media coverage of the munitions shortfall as manufactured, even as independent analysts continued to flag real vulnerabilities in the logistics and industrial base. Trump has previously used the Defense Production Act, first during the COVID pandemic to push industry to produce critical medical supplies, and later to boost domestic minerals production needed for defense and high-tech manufacturing. Former President Biden also invoked the act during his term to support clean energy supply chain goals, using the same emergency authority to prioritize domestic production of key technologies like batteries and grid components. The new order creates formal authority for production prioritization, financial incentives, and the establishment of an advisory committee, giving the administration more structured tools to direct, subsidize, and coordinate the ramp-up of weapons manufacturing. Trump has a history of pressuring defense firms, at times threatening restrictions on stock buybacks and hinting at tougher scrutiny of profits if companies do not invest more aggressively in capacity and surge readiness. For years, the Pentagon has voiced concern about the defense industry's ability to produce weapons quickly at scale, warning that a lean, peacetime-optimized industrial base might struggle to sustain prolonged high-intensity warfare against a major adversary. The U.S. military is reportedly preparing to withdraw around 20% of its refueling aircraft from Israel. The reported move follows recent diplomatic developments between Washington and Tehran. Israeli media reported that the drawdown comes after a truce agreement was reached between the U.S. and Iran. Officials have not publicly linked the redeployment to any specific military decision. Reports suggest a U.S.-Iran memorandum of understanding created a framework aimed at ending hostilities. The agreement is said to focus on reducing tensions between the two countries. Israeli Transport Minister Miri Regev said the U.S. had deployed 72 refueling aircraft at Ben Gurion Airport. The aircraft were positioned there during heightened regional tensions. According to Channel 12, it remains unclear whether the aircraft will leave Israel entirely or be moved elsewhere. No official details on their final destination have been released. U.S. refueling aircraft reportedly occupied nearly half of the available parking area at Ben Gurion Airport. The deployment highlighted the scale of the American military presence during the crisis.
We had a great relationship. We're talking about some end details. I didn't like that he did an attack based on there was a very minor little thing with some drones that were released, and he ends up doing I saw that attack. I saw where that bomb went. Did you see what happened? That was a vicious, that was too much. You can do too much also. But we've had a very effective relationship. Without the United States, there would be no Israel. Without me, there would be no Israel, because no other president was willing to do what I did. I've had a great relationship with Bibi, but now Bibi has to be more responsible with respect to Lebanon. Lebanon used to be a great country. It was a country where you had professors, doctors, lawyers. The great intellect was in Lebanon. Now it's terrible. I would say of all countries, they've been treated the worst. And they can't defend themselves. And they have Hezbollah, which is a problem for them. So, no, I'm not happy with the way Israel has handled themselves with Lebanon and with Hezbollah. They should have been able to do the job faster. It just goes on forever. And when that happens, it throws a negative light on the big deal, and that's the deal with Iran. So when you ask me about Bibi, an unbelievable relationship. But Israel would have been blown up a long time ago had I not gotten involved.